Psychological anime. Personally, for me, I enjoy this genre. This genre for me is like the genre I'd watch if I were bored and I need something to kill the time. And by kill the time, I mean kill a lot of time. Because while I can theorize about many other different genres and many other different shows, it's not quite the same as when I'm theorizing for these shows. So the nice thing about psychology anime is that, well, what's happening in there is really everyday stuff that might happen to you or me. Sometimes we don't even realize it's happening to us, hence, it's familiar but it's foreign to us. Well, unless you're a psychologist and you decide to watch it just to analyze it, in which case, go for it. But even for an average enjoyer, it's also fun to try and analyze how the character's feeling, how they're thinking, how their action and their interests can coincide with one another, or how their mutual interests can coincide with one another, hence the cooperation, or how it would not, hence the antagonistic relations. And it's actually an interesting thing because even though it's an everyday interaction or, well, something similar to an everyday interaction, it's not quite, well, that because in our life, we work in a way that everyone can do whatever they want within the set boundaries. But in anime, since everything is set up, it can be an ideal situation or, well, the worst case scenario situation. And it's exactly because of that that it's interesting. And another part of the interesting thing about this particular genre is the development. What I enjoy the most from this genre is the slow build up of everything. The character does something, goes through something, experience something, learns something. They experience it all, and we see as they experience it. We watch. But the thing is, even though they have the small payoff that, oh, this character developed in this moment in this way, and all of that, it pales in comparison to the final climax of the show where, oh, so that's what happens. It's just so epic, it's just so good. And it's just one of those things. You can't really get mad about it, you can't really hate it, it's just good. So, yeah, if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you like character development, this is definitely the anime for you. But at the same time, there are some cons. Now, what's not happening is constant fan service. Now, the thing about psychological anime is they want to make the scenarios as realistic as possible. If is involved, sure. If something supernatural is involved, sure. If sci-fi is involved, sure. But from the standpoint of what's happening or the characters themselves, they need to be as realistic as they possibly can, or else it simply wouldn't have the impact that, well, this kind of show would have had if they were more realistic. In fact, that raw realistic performance, that raw realistic reaction is what we want from these particular shows. And if you don't like that kind of stuff, then this is not the thing for you. For example, if you want the power of friendship to an unrealistic value like in Fairy Tail or in Naruto, then this is not for you. I mean, yes, those shows also have some psychological aspects to it, but that's not the main point of interest. The main point of interest in a psychological anime is the interaction of the character and how the character develops individually or as a group. Whereas in Naruto and Fairy Tail, obviously the focus is the fight scene itself. So, yeah. Would I recommend this? Oh yeah, I like this. I mean, in terms of enjoyment, I do not enjoy it as much as I would other shows because this show requires me to think for me to enjoy it. Like, for example, when I'm watching a psychological show, I'd be thinking, why did this character do this? Why does he or she act in this way? What's in it for him? What's in it for her? Does this suit his character or not? What he would probably do, or is this maybe a trick, a lie? You know, backstabbing kind of stuff. And for me, that's just a part of the fun. But maybe it's not for you. Maybe it's not for other people. And it's not for me to decide. But on a general standpoint, these shows are enjoyable. Even if most of the shows with in this genre or with this kind of approach does not score very well and it's not that popular. So yeah, I guess next are some of the recommendations. Moving on to recommendations themselves, let's start from the top left corner and moving on to in a clockwise motion. So we have Axel World on the first slot, and for me, even though like most of the other shows I'm gonna be recommending this time, it's not tagged as psychological in my anime list or other anime websites. As a personal viewer who watches the show, I can confidently say that yeah, a psychological genre actually plays a huge role on this particular show, because, well, if you watch Sword Art Online, which is set in the same system, well, slightly different parallel universe kind of world, and one's in the past, one's in the future in terms of timeline, according to the author, we can see the connection and we have enough to make the theory. And for me, if you know about the incarnate system in Sword Art Online, it plays a much bigger role in this particular work than it does in Sword Art Online. And while at first, on your first view, you might not think too much about the psychology of the actors, if you're like me and you decide to rewatch shows because you like it, well, knowing more about the character, how they think, how they feel, actually explains more about their action and how they perform in terms of understanding and enjoying the show. The same can be said about Grisaya. Now, the anime kind of dwells a little bit in psychology, but not much. There's desperation, there's guilt and all that, but not as much as the visual novel. And for me, it's both a good thing and a bad thing, because obviously the visual novel is a hentai game, an eroge, and an anime is usually played on TV, so obviously we're not gonna have that. But the character interactions themselves are interesting. And while we don't get to choose the romance or the story patterns like we would have been able to do in the visual novel, if you see it, you'll see why it's psychologically tagged, and it's, well, it might be disturbing to some. Not for me, I fully enjoyed it, trust me. Everything. And then moving on, we have Fate. Now, yeah, the picture stick, not exactly Fate series screenshot, but then again, almost none of these are. And the reason why I'm talking about Fate, even though it's more of a supernatural shonen seinen kind of show, is because of the hero experience and the masters themselves, how they interact with one another between servants and master, along with how they interact with the enemy, is quite interesting. You get to dig deeper into these characters as they interact with one another, and it's not just from the main Fate series, it also applies to the other branches of the Fate series, or heck, the entirety of the Nasuverse. It's just that if I were to put even more of the Nasuverse in here, the entire recommendation would simply be Nasuverse, because yeah, I guess I'm a simp. So it's kind of interesting, the polarity of how the heroic spirit thinks versus how the wizards think, because wizards tend to be cold-blooded in this world, or at least that's the stereotype they made for themselves, and the heroic spirit is supposed to be people who unconditionally love humanity because they fought for the future of humanity, or at least that's how Karna put it. It's kind of interesting to see how they fight one another. It's nice to see how they become hypocrites for their own ideals. It's nice to see how they despair or find joy in certain things. And because of that, I put 2 Fate in there. And the most interesting part is the last one on this slide is not even an anime for now. It's just a game. Yeah, it's animated, but we don't really see this character in particular. And well, if you dig deep into psychology, you might actually find out why I put this picture in here. It's called multiple personality disorder. You can find out more about that on your own. But it is what it is, and it is very enjoyable. We have Nagino Asukara, and well, it's not exactly new, but then again, it's not exactly that old either. It's definitely still considered a modern show, but it's fairly aged. And compared to modern day anime, I must say that the quality is still very much up to par, if not even better than some. And then again, we can also chuck it up to art style, but even without the art style, if you see the beautiful animation and the beautiful color template they used, well, it kind of shows you why it's there on this recommendation. And the thing is, this show is very much underrated, and since it's one of my favorite shows, I just want to get it out there so most people would know about this show. And yeah, but the thing is, this show is also a romance and a drama show. Because it's a romance and also a drama show, if I were to tell you anything about it now, I'd be spoiling you the story, and I don't want to do that, so I won't. Moving on, we have Kokoro Connect, which is a show that's for some reason not tagged as psychological, even though it clearly is a psychological show. It shows how people would react if their walls are taken down from one another, and it also shows interest, character development, character growth, interaction, and all the things that should be shown and has been shown in psychological shows. And I don't know, maybe some people disagree, but you should try and give it a watch and give your own opinion about it. You can comment down below if you agree or disagree with me on this one. But yeah, Kokoro no Connect, definitely a recommendation from me. Next, we have Yugoku no Moriarty. For those of you who don't know Moriarty, he is the character portrayed as the rival for the detective Sherlock Holmes, which is another fictional character who also appears in this show, but as a sub character or a supporting cast, though he will later on also be a main character, kind of. Usually depicted as protagonist, but this time as an antagonist of sorts, rival, kinda. It's complicated. The one thing I have to complain about this show is that it needs more women. I'm a male viewer. I want more waifus, not husbandos. I'm not gay, I'm straight. But yeah, it is what it is. All in all, the show is enjoyable. I definitely did enjoy watching the show, theory crafting on how the crimes would be carried out, how it won't be, will it get busted or not, what tricks would be used, and all that. But yeah, it is what it is, and it is enjoyable for me. I also enjoy how the brothers' backstory were given light and given the proper explanation that it deserved because those brothers trust one another with their lives and they're very loyal to one another. And then moving on, we have Guilty Crown. Just like Nagino Asukara, this show is slightly dated as well. But the thing is, the same case as Nagino Asukara, it's not exactly bad because by all means, it is good. The animation, the art style is similar to modern style. I mean, if we're asking the question of who's copying who, this one's older, so it's definitely not this one copying the modern ones. But since the weapon used in the anime is a crystallization of a person's heart, you get glimpse into how the person's personality actually is, whether they know it or not. And for me, that's kind of psychological. There's also the character interaction and the character growth. Definitely should give it a try. I absolutely enjoyed the hell out of this show, and I want everybody to enjoy it as well. Soundtrack's awesome, even more awesome than most of the modern day shows, and that just shows how old shows can also be good. But yeah, I think that's it for this video. Comment down below if you have something more to add, to say, or want me to see. Thanks. Bye.